Success doesn't always come in the package we expect, but sometimes it comes in something even better. And I would really tell people to rely on their strengths and to focus on that more than the things they struggle with.
It
Right.
is a step of success to just say, this is the deal. I have this challenge and I need this to be able to meet
Mm-hmm.
my objective. So, like, this needs to happen. And it just being part of the process, right? Instead of being a
Mm-hmm.
problem or instead of feeling like a burden or instead of getting into the like, I don't know, I want to hide this or whatever. And just, I know, like, for me, and I encourage other people who are dealing with this, that it's okay. Like, just ask for what you need.
And that shows that humility that we're all going to have things that we're going to struggle with. But we also have things that we're good at. So I think that comes in. And I think the advocacy part also comes in too. I really want my students to be able to advocate for themselves because all my students one day are going to leave me. And I hope they graduate and achieve every single dream that they have. But for a lot of them, their disability is going to stay.
Hi, and welcome to the Bouncing Back Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa McCurley, and after my own battle with autoimmune disease, I created this podcast to share tools, strategies, and inspiring stories for other professionals navigating life and business with chronic illness. Be sure to join our Facebook community, Bouncing Back Podcast, where we continue the conversation. I'm so excited to introduce you to our special guest today, Michelle Lee Steiner. She's a para-educator specializing in helping students with disabilities. She's also a writer, speaker, photographer, and advocate highlighting life with a learning disability. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so
Hey.
much.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for being here today.
Yes, I'm looking forward to having this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Let's just jump right in. Can you share with us your story, your disability, if you're comfortable, and how that shows up for you? Maybe how you figured out what you had, and we'll just take it from
Sure.
there.
I would be happy to do that. My name is Michelle Steiner. I live in Pennsylvania with my husband Ron and our two cats, Jack and Sparrow.
Oh.
You may see one of them come across the
We
screen.
love pets. Come
Oh,
visit.
good. And I have a learning disability. I was diagnosed with, I have dyscalculia. Which is a math learning disability. I have limited hand dexterity in both of my hands, and I have visual perception issues. And I was first diagnosed with a learning disability early on in my life. When I was in kindergarten, my
Wow,
teacher
that's
saw,
early.
I was really lucky because they just had legislation that was passed a few years prior, and people really didn't know a whole lot about learning disabilities in general. And my teacher noticed that I was really having a hard time with writing my name, tying my shoes. That was always really difficult for me. And counting anything math related was really hard. And she recommended that I get tested for having a learning disability. And sure enough, I have one. And they did not give it a specific name at that point. They didn't call it dyscalculia. They just gave it more as a blanket term. But they knew when I was 5 or 6, I was not going to be a mathematician. That was already determined. And I had to repeat kindergarten the following year in a different school in our district. And I began to have specialty instruction and accommodations. And school was a real struggle for me, academically
Mm.
and socially. Academically, I just really struggled to learn. And I just wanted to make my parents proud and to be able to do well at school. And I just really struggled with that. Socially, it was really hard too. I can remember I went to a very small school district where everybody knew each other.
Oh,
And
goodness.
I everybody could see that I went to learning support for classes and to have a test read aloud or to have extra test time. And it made me stick out in a really bad way, and I wasn't one of them. In learning support, I really struggled too. Most of my peers had behavior issues. A lot of them had reading issues. Not very many struggled with math. And some of them, I can look back on that, and they might have had autism or other disabilities, and they just threw everybody in one room together, and it was not always the best thing. And when I was in regular ed, I really struggled too in the classroom because everybody could see that I was really struggling in there to do that well. As I went through school, though, it got a lot easier for me academically. I was in all regular ed classes except for a math and a resource room, and I was on honor roll. but it got harder for me socially. I just really didn't feel like I fit
Mm.
in with anybody. And I was bullied, and it really intensified during that time. And I remember I knew I just was not getting a connection with the people I went to school with. So I ended up finding an art group that was just right outside of our school district. And I found other peers that were my age, and I could shed that reputation that followed me since kindergarten. And I can
Sure.
just remember, though, that was one of those turning points where I knew that I wasn't going to have that connection with them. But I found other people. And once I transitioned out of that group, I found an adult writing group. And it's really amazing. We still meet 20 some years later to talk about our
Wow.
writing. Yeah, we're still in each other's lives. And they were the ones that really encouraged me. You should really write about having a life with your life with a learning disability. I said, "Oh, I don't know if I'm ready for that." But once I finally did, that is when I really started to have a lot of that confidence. But that didn't come for a while. Put that on the shelf. I can also remember there was another really great thing we were doing at that time. We were trying to figure out, what do I want to do when I'm done with high school? I knew I wanted to go to college, but I knew it was going to be hard for me, especially with math. And I
Mm.
wasn't alone in my fears. I had a learning support teacher who said, "I don't think you can handle college," and suggested a trade
Mm.
school. And that just didn't really interest me. And I decided I'm going to go to college. And once I was right before I got there, I had a psychiatrist who told me I would not be able to go, most likely beyond community college. And I get to community college and I faced even more stigma. People were saying that using a calculator was cheating, or we use our brains in
Mm.
this class. They thought that you were getting the answers if you went and had extra time on tests. And I can remember I had an advisor who told me I was going to have limited job choices once I was done with school. So
Jeez.
it was really difficult those years, but I was able to get my associate's degree in early childhood education. I moved out on my own for a while, which I really enjoyed because I'm not able to drive because of my disability. So I loved having that independence of being able to go where I wanted to go, and just having that. I was working some temp jobs and some child cares and some other places, but I always wanted more for myself. And be careful what you wish for, because it just might come true, as the old adage goes.
For sure.
And I can remember I had to move back with my parents for a season because my job was downsizing and financially I was not doing well. And during that time, I decided this is the time to go back to school. And I carefully researched programs at the university. And I found one that had the least amount of math and science possible and had disability accommodations. And I decided that's what I really wanted to do. And this time I used them. I went into the school, I registered with the office for students with disabilities. I had a note taker, I had extended test time,
Nice.
and I also had tutoring when I needed it. And most importantly, I advocated for myself. I would be the first person to tell other people, that I had a learning disability and these are the services I'm going to need. I would say that to my professors. And most of them were wonderful, did everything they could do to help, and were really supportive. I got a couple that didn't quite get the memo, but you'll have that. And it was a lot better. It was just such a better experience. I was able to make Dean's List for a semester,
Wow.
and I was able to graduate with a bachelor's degree despite being told I couldn't do it. After college, it took me a while to find the right job. I've been working, a lot of places claim that they were disability friendly, but they were anything but that. I've been in my current employer for 15 years and I love working with kids in the classroom. I find it rewarding to work with other students who have disabilities and to be able to help them and show them how to advocate and to help them with their work. They all know, do not ask me to help them with math. I can't do that. And I also met my husband while I was in college, and I got married after that point and after I graduated. And that's actually what led me to have another dream of mine come true. When we bought our house, I was diagnosed with limited hand dexterity and I could not open the front door. And I was so frustrated that there was a call on the mighty for what's a seemingly easy task for other people, but it's hard with your disability. And when I wrote that first story and it got published, it was really healing for me. And I had such a great following of other people that were saying, "That's my story." Or I thought I was
Mm.
the only one. That encouraged me to write other articles for the mighty, and I started getting published in other places, and I started my blog called Michelle's Mission. And along with that also came up the love for photography. I'm not able to drive, but when I'm on my walks, I get that chance to literally stop and smell the roses and take pictures of flowers. And people will tell me, you bring out the details in a flower that I would miss. And I get to post them on my blog, and I've had them in magazines. And I think to myself, rather than being sad that I don't have a ride somewhere, I get that opportunity to be able to take those pictures and notice things. And there would just be so much that I would miss if I was behind the wheel of a car.
Yeah, for sure. Gosh, what an amazing story. Do you think the difference between your community college experience and your 4-year university program was as much a difference between mindset and supports offerings of the institutions, or were you different and better to advocate for yourself? Or was it a combination?
I think it was a combination of both. I think I was more mature, definitely in my 20s than I was my later 20s than I definitely was whenever I was just right out of high school. So I had that maturity.
Right, we don't know anything, yeah.
No, you don't. And there was things I didn't know too that I didn't even find out until I had a student that was in an honors class, and they were had a disability. I was a one-on-one, and they were talking about college. And I can remember the teacher saying, when you go to college, if you're a B student, expect your grades to go down to be a C student for that semester. If you're an
Who
A
were these
student,
limiting belief teachers that were around you? What in the world?
but what I remember hearing though was, but my grades did drop dramatically, and that was a real shock. And if I would have had that information, because everybody was telling me you need to try harder, and it was really difficult. If I would have known that, okay, that's a typical thing, I might have had at least a little more, okay, I'm going to have to expect this and then to be able to work around it. But I can remember that. And that was hard. But also, I think it was, if I got a D on something, I thought, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to pass. And I knew that, okay, sometimes we're not always going to get the best grade. Let's just try to work harder, or let's try to bring the grade up. I can remember that. And I also remember, too, I think the schools were just different. And the faculty might have been different, too, compared to community college with going to university. Just different people. I knew the department was wonderful. I knew somebody, whenever I was in school, that always would say, oh, you have it easy because you have a disability. I wish
What?
Yeah, people would say that. And this person went through the program with education to become a teacher. And after she took that class and she learned about learning disabilities, she said, you really suffered in school. That must have been really hard for you. So I knew it was, if that could change their minds, it could change anybody. And when I went into that program, I just had so much compassion and so much understanding from the professors. And it was just, I was definitely in the right program for that. And I think that makes a difference too, when you're in the right program with the right people that understand that. And I think also, I just knew that I had to advocate. I had to admit that I had a disability, and these are the services that I'm going to need, and these are the things I'm good at, and these are the things I'm going to struggle with. And just being able to have that understanding made all the difference.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the things that we explore on this podcast. And I know this was a bit of a struggle for me, having such a shift from being a successful entrepreneur, a successful real estate person, where I could really set goals and move towards them, to having so many physical limitations. Not being able to drive was one of them for a very long time. And still I have vertigo come up where I can't drive for periods of time. Mm-hmm. And instead of getting in a pity party about it and feeling all the emotions that weren't positive about it, moving to a place of just saying, this is the deal. Like, right. It is a step of success to just say, this is the deal. I have this challenge and I need this to be able to meet my objective. So like, this needs to happen. And it just being part of the process, right? Instead of being a problem, or instead of feeling like a burden, or instead of getting into the like, I don't know, I want to hide this or whatever. And just, I know like for me, and I encourage other people who are dealing with this, that it's okay. Like, just ask for what you need. Right, if you need to use the restroom, you're not going to sit there. I guess some people would sit there and suffer, but I mean, it gets to the point where you can't. Just take care of your needs. And we all have different needs. We have different needs at different times in our life, different seasons in life. And that's actually strength, to learn how to speak up. And without shame for people who maybe aren't as along the way
Mhm.
yet with being able to be compassionate, and but it is a process for them to learn too.
Exactly. It really is. It's being that compassionate. It is learning. And yes, definitely. It's always a learning process.
For sure. And I know, like, for me, sometimes when I come up against those individuals who maybe aren't as evolved as they could be in their compassion, humanity department, of saying, I may be the only person that they interact with this year or this 5 years that
Right.
has the opportunity to shift their understanding. So maybe instead of being in reciprocity and giving back to them some of their snark, I could open a door. I try to have that dialogue with myself. It's not always
I
successful,
know.
but it's
Exactly. I
it's the place to
agree.
try to come from when I'm my best self. So I bet you have an opportunity. You've had your whole life, it sounds like, an opportunity to really have to deal with that, but maybe try to convert it to something positive.
Exactly. Trying to make that into something positive and also just looking for those opportunities to bring that in to like education into people too, because a lot of times it's hard for people to understand what learning disabilities are. I know with people can't see them, so sometimes that's really difficult. And even people that you would think, oh, they should know, they really don't. So sometimes it's that education that really
Yeah.
goes a long way.
Yeah. And you're right to touch on the invisible part of
Hmm.
it. Like we have that with autoimmune disease, it's largely, not always, but it's often an invisible illness. And so people say, you look fine. You don't
Hmm.
look sick, or you don't look like you have a disability. People are
Right.
trained to have so much compassion when we see a child in a wheelchair or something like that. But
Hmm.
it's that push and pull of they
Yeah,
don't get the story that they expect in their mind.
I
Yeah.
hear
How do
you. They
you
don't.
overcome that? Do you have an elevator pitch or anything to address that with parents maybe that you deal with? Or
A lot of times what I might get is sometimes people that there's a couple different things I might say. If somebody doesn't know me and I somehow the conversation comes up, I'll just and they'll say you don't look like you're disabled. I'll say sometimes some people have disabilities that they can see and other people have ones that they can't see. And I think that is a really important thing. It's just that's that factual information that some people can't see them and because everybody's looking for the ones they can see. And so I think that's a really helpful one. Another one I get for people who know me is, oh, you must have overcome your disability because you have a bachelor's degree or you have a job. So you must really know what you're doing. And I have to tell them, well, I've had success, but there are still some things that I can't do and I still have a disability.
yeah. I think keying in on what can I do and
Hmm.
not lamenting the things I can't. Like, what's the point of putting? There's always things certain people can't do. And I'm not trying to
Right.
minimize having a disability. It's obviously definitely amplified. We all know people who go through life focusing on the things that they can't do or that don't work, versus those
Hmm.
who really empower themselves by the things that they do have agency over, even when they wish it was more.
Exactly.
So, what about your students? How do you incorporate your personal experience with them and empower them? And I'm going to guess it's probably a lot of your internal dialogue to chart an easier path for them.
A lot of times it's like hearing a recording myself at that age. Not everybody, but a lot of them. And I work with seventh graders. So I hear students that say, I'm stupid, I hate my disability, why do I have an IEP? And I get that chance to go in there and tell them, you're not stupid. In fact, I had to tell a girl that today that said she was stupid. I said, no, you're not dumb. You just yeah, you're not. And she thanked me for that. I have students that'll ask why they have an IEP, and I'll explain if I know, and I'll be like, it's not a bad thing to have that paper that says that we're here. This is here to help you to do all that stuff. And having a disability isn't always a bad thing. And sometimes we talk about, okay, I can't do math, and that's okay because they get to see that adults struggle. Everybody has something that they can't do, and that's all right. And that shows that humility that we're all going to have things that we're going to struggle with. But we also have things that we're good at. So I think that comes in. And I think the advocacy part also comes in too. I really want my students to be able to advocate for themselves because all my students one day are going to leave me. And I hope they graduate and achieve every single dream that they have. But for a lot of them, their disability is going to stay. And I think it's so key that we show them how to advocate for themselves because they need to know how to speak up. And I'll use that in the classroom. I had a student a couple of days ago that could not figure something out. Or she had, I think it was a question about a grade. And I said, okay, how do you think you should handle this if your teacher didn't grade this assignment and you have a question about that? I think I should email her. And I said, that's great. And the student emailed the teacher. And I think that's the key thing, is just showing them ways that they can be able to speak up for themselves.
That makes sense. Because a lot of times I would guess people just don't know how to do that. It's
Mm-hmm.
not that they wouldn't or don't
Mm-hmm.
want to. Interesting. So for the ones who get into the I'm not enough conversation,
Yeah.
which by the way, everybody tells themselves that.
Yes.
But how do you coach them out of that a little bit? You want them to feel heard, but you also want to empower them. How does that kind of conversation go?
What I will tell some of them is that everybody has something that they do struggle with, and everyone has something that they're great at. But I also try to encourage them too. So if I might have a student says, I'm not good enough to go to college, I can tell them, you don't have to go to college if that's not what you want to do. You can go to a school where you can get a job. But I try to maybe give them some ideas, but I do share with them there are resources that can help you if you're at school. There's also resources that can help you at a job. And I'm also really big on being honest, but saying things in a kind way.
Hmm.
I know that I'll have students that'll tell me, I hate this class. Where am I ever going to use this in the real world? And rather than try to defend where they might use this at, I tell them, you may not use it. This might be something someday that you're not going to use in your life. But right now, we need to get this done because you need this information for now so you're able to graduate and move on and then make those decisions.
Makes sense. Yeah. I love that. So they feel heard, but you also put it in the context of it's not forever,
Yeah,
It's,
it's not.
yeah, for sure. So art, it sounds like art played a huge role in your life, in your healing, and
Mhm.
in your journey as a human being. Can you tell us more about that?
Writing and reading have always been really healing for me. I can remember I thought I wasn't good at anything, but I wrote a story about a dinosaur in second or third grade that my dad found and said, wow, this is really good. And my whole world opened up at that point because I didn't think I was good at anything. And my dad would read me a story every night. And I learned to love books and to read. And reading and writing became my world. But I didn't think I was an artist. I really didn't think I had a lot of talent. I couldn't draw very well. And that was definitely something I really struggled with. But I had people that could see my potential as well. I remember I took a picture at my prom and there was a tree at the venue. And everybody, all my peers go, why did you take a picture of a tree? And I showed it to one of the older women in my writing group, and she said, wow, this shows perspective. And I still didn't think of myself as an artist. I put that on the shelf for all those years. And my husband and I were at a wedding years ago, and I took a picture of these angel statues in a cemetery. And I had a friend that looked at him and said, wow, these are really good. And this friend was not flattering. She would say, if you did something really well, she would let you know. And I thought, okay, I'm going to enter these into an art show. And I ended up getting an honorable mention and that just encouraged me to start taking more pictures and entering more shows. And then eventually I just started taking pictures of flowers and other things.
Do you think so? You mentioned, if I remember correctly, one of the aspects of your learning disability is a perspective
Mm-hmm.
difference, correct?
Yes,
Do you
visual
think
perception.
yeah, literally see things differently, other things than what people see? I don't mean things that aren't there, but that you see things in a unique way that most of us either don't
Yes.
notice or don't see.
A lot of that is true. Like I will be in the car with my husband and I'll say, did you see that sign or did you see that flower? And he'll be like, no, I'm driving. Now he's getting better at this because he listens to these episodes and he'll be like, okay, I talk about that a lot. But sometimes I'll just be on a walk. And because I'm not behind the wheel of a car, I get a chance to observe a flower that's blooming. And maybe yesterday when I walked past it to go to the gym, it might have just been this little bud. And then all of a sudden, it just starts to go into this full blown flower, and I get to take that picture of it. And I get to see a lot of my old favorites. Every flower has a season in our neighborhood, but then sometimes just little things that come up that I'm able to see different things. And if I was driving, I wouldn't see that. I can also remember this summer, there was a moth that was on the sidewalk. And
Mm.
if I would have never been walking, I would have never noticed that moth that was just laying there. And I got a beautiful picture of that. So I think that's where I get that chance to stop and notice the details and to be mindful.
Wouldn't it be nice if we all did that more? How many wonderful books by genius, spiritual, aware individuals preach
Right.
that. They don't preach because,
Mhm.
but say that again and
Right.
like we can't hear it enough. I know I was one of those sometimes weird kids where I noticed stuff other people didn't notice. I'd be like, "Oh yeah, look at the moth on the ground," and everybody's okay. Because when you're like 10,
Right.
but I can remember that feeling, and then I think I just quit sharing stuff. Or with my parents, my mom always, God bless her, was like, "Oh, that's so interesting," and I could have put a bird in a pine cone, a feather, and she would think it was. But really getting feedback a lot of thought it was great, like you said when you were young. Of, oh, that's interesting. You notice this shadow or this thing, or I would
Yeah.
find beauty in things that people would be like, "That's weird" or "That's gross." But then sometimes when you take a picture and you can show somebody else what that creates a transformation.
It does because you're bringing to light what maybe you're able to see, and then other that causes maybe other people to think.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I definitely think people too, as we get a little older and a little bit more open and work on ourselves, maybe people are more open. Kids can be very closed off, for sure. Gosh, I'm so amazed at your journey through life and all the things that you've accomplished. You've accomplished things that are so hard for people to accomplish who aren't living with a learning disability. I can't imagine the perseverance and the strength that's taken to get there. What would you say to somebody who is feeling like they're not in their power right now? Maybe they have a diagnosis or a physical limitation that they're feeling is taking front and center of their life. What would you say to them to help them get a little further down the road with that?
One of the things I would just encourage them is to know what they want and to be able to find a way to do that. And I think that's the biggest thing in life is to really know that. And there's always a way to be able to do that. Success doesn't always come in the package we expect, but sometimes it comes in something even better. And I would really tell people to rely on their strengths and to focus on that more than the things they struggle with.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have goals for your photography? And I'm not saying you should. I'm a business person, so we're all with our goals. But do you have any that you have for your writing and photography, or is it just something you enjoy?
I would definitely.
You've been publishing a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know one of the things I would definitely love to expand my blog, and I would love to do more photography. Would love to do some note cards or some journals with that. But I'd also
Yeah.
love to do a book and to combine my photography and my writing and about my story. That's definitely something in the future. And I have some other things that I'd like to write to really educate people on learning disabilities. I've been published in some anthologies, but I don't have my own book yet.
Makes sense. I think that's wonderful, and I think it would help a lot of people. I think a lot of times when people don't show up as their best selves to these conversations for other people, it's because they don't know what to do. And I think when people don't know what to do, they a lot of times get frustrated. I think sometimes the pushback people dealing with illnesses or dealing with disability is just coming from other people's inability. And it makes you feel powerless when you don't understand something or know what to do.
Right.
And so I definitely think having something that, in the workplace, for example, to help people understand, like you mentioned, storytelling, empowering people to storytell and understand that perspective of what people are going through to better understand how to support them.
Exactly. It's just knowing that, how to support somebody, how to be able to just be able to help where I can.
Yeah, and maybe sometimes dropping them in the story instead of giving them a to-do list might be a more
Right.
empowering way.
Because what I try to do, like with my writing, is I try really hard to do like nature. I try to combine that where I'm explaining to people that have disabilities an analogy with like maybe a metaphor, like a flower blooming and the process of accepting my disability. So they're able to understand that. And I also try to give that to maybe people who don't have disabilities but don't understand what they are as well, too.
Yeah. Where can people find you and your work?
You can find me at my blog, www.michellesmission.com.
Awesome. I love that. And your website's the same too? Or
Yes.
michellesmission.com. It's a website and blog.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay. I'll link in the show notes below. I was on it earlier. She's got a lot of different headers you can click on, like her story and the blog and photos, and it's really a wonderful, fleshed out website. Thank you so much for coming up on our time. Do you have any final parting words you want to share?
I would just love to encourage people not to give up that have learning disabilities, and for parents who have children with them, not to give up on them as well.
I love that's beautiful. Yeah, we absolutely don't want to give up on each other. It's too easy to give up on ourselves.
Agreed.
For sure. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you for being our guest today. And thank you for tuning in to the Bouncing Back podcast. Please rate, review, and share this podcast. It really helps us get the word out so much. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more stories of success. So until then, keep bouncing back. If these stories of strength and comeback hit home, you'll want to hear what's next. Click the video on screen to keep learning from our incredible guests on how to bounce back and thrive.